As he said, my name is Troit Lynes. Okay, and I'm feel a young 48 years old, the husband of one wife. Proud to say that. Been married now over 20 years, going on 21 years. My wife's name is. Look around and we see who are the so-called role models. Who are the people that people want to be like? And when we see what that is, the majority of them today is they may not be ideal. But I grew up in the 90s. And as a young man, I found myself in a gang. I grew up to Strawn's Corner, the heart of Strawn's Corner, off East Street. And in those times, gang banging was a thing. And it was a big thing. That was when it just started in the Bahamas. And I grew up in it. Some folks go out and join a gang. I kind of grew up in it. All of the people in the gang were my neighbors and friends. And I was cool. Back then you thought it was cool to be in a gang. It was cool at that time when you don't know any better. And at a very young age, at the age of 13 years old, some of you older than that, but at the age of 13, I find myself arrested for the very first time. 13-year-old, just a boy, fighting downtown with rival gang. And I found myself locked up, arrested, and thrown in a cell. And then coming out of that, because it was a group of us that was arrested. So coming out of that, I felt big. Felt like, hey, I passed that test. And not long after that, I got arrested again. And every time I get arrested, the charges seem to be getting bigger and bigger. The next time after that, I was not much older because I was wearing the exact same clothes. I thought, hey, man, listen, these clothes must be the jinx. Maybe I need to throw it away. And I probably did. But every time I would go in the cell and come out, it's like I got another stripe on my shoulder. I got a higher raise. I began to elevate in the gang. I know we hear a lot of stories with, this one is a gang member, he was a gang banger. But I came from the heart. They say nothing good could have come out of Strawn's Corner. Once people hear you from Strawn's Corner, in fact, I remember, years after I already changed my life, and I met my wife, and I remember she asked me to take something to her mother at her mother's job, and her mother had a co-worker that recognized me. She didn't know who I was right then, but she knew the past that I used to live. And she said to her mother, my wife's mother's name is Colebrook. And she was like, Miss Colebrook, don't let that one near your daughter. Shoot him. She didn't say shoot him like for her to literally shoot me, but she was saying, this boy ain't no good. Because of the life that I used to live, the choices that I used to make. So the choices that we make in our lives affects us in some cases for the rest of our lives. The things that we do will determine what is going to happen in our lives. And I remember just going through the motions. Just being a gangbanger. There were folks that used to look up to me, thought that I was something good. Boys wanted to be like you. The girls wanted to have you just because they think it was cool. And some of you are like that right now. They ain't like that? The girls didn't think they was cool? But back in the day, that's how it used to be. When we look at society today, we look at who the role models are. I mean, you get people looking up to people who singing a bunch of nonsense. And they feel as though, they're good. They feel like that's the way to be. That's the way to go. But not so. But I find myself, after being locked up over and over, and like I said, the charges begin to get bigger and bigger, when I realized, the next thing I know, I was locked up this time, but it was not for something that had a time limit for the sentence. I was locked up for murder. And so this was like this one is, this is different. It began to hit home. Because at that time, the only penalty for murder in the Bahamas was death. Young man got killed, rival gang member. I was like the leader of my clique. I was like the leader of a certain faction of the gang. There were different sections. And so there were like, persons who would be in charge. And a young man got killed at the edge of my turf. Next thing I know, I was, obviously my name would be one of the first names called. But I was brought before the court charged, locked up and charged for murder. And this time it was, it was serious. I had to begin to look back, look over my life and wonder and think, what is it that I really want to do? What is it that I wanted in life? And I remember going before the courts, going on trial. I remember standing before a judge and 12 jurors. I remember looking those jurors in the eyes, and the judge looking me in the eyes, and I remember the jurors bringing back a verdict, and the verdict was guilty. The judge looked me in the eyes and said, "Troit, Lynes, you're hereby sentenced to death, to hang by the rope until you die." And at that moment, at that point, it's like my life was flashing before my eyes. And I started to think of all the people who tried to instill goodness in me. I thought about one of my former senior masters, a man by the name of Leonard Johnson from C.I. Gibson. And I remember him many, many days trying to speak to me and try to steer me in the right direction. I remember Mr. Moxie from Donald Davis going out of his way and coming at my house in the night to see my parents. And listen, at that time I kind of hated him with all my guts. Couldn't stand him. I remember hearing my grandmother's prayer, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, praying and crying out to God and asking God to save me. It's like everything would just replay back in my head about all the decisions that I had made in my life, which had led me to be at that point right there. It wasn't easy. And so we reach a point that we look up to people people that have nothing positive to say. The very life that they live is a life of negativity. And so we got to realize that, listen, only that which is done for Christ is going to last. We reach a point in our society that wrong is right, and right is wrong. The things that we know is a lie, we give it credence to them. We entertain it. We looking at it as though this is right. So we got to be careful. We got to be mindful about the decisions that we make. Because when you make these decisions, you're the one who's going to have to deal with the consequences. There's a saying that every cause, there is an effect. And for every action, there's a reaction. In other words, when you do something, that is going to cause something else to happen. That's just the way the world goes. It changed my perspective. And what brought me to where I am today is only nothing short but the grace of God. And I remember going before the courts after being sentenced to death to hang by the rope. Young man, when I got arrested and charged from when I was 19 years old. 19. And I had lived a life like a full life. And I remember going before the appeals court. And you get a judge. You have 3 judges. You have a prosecutor whose job is to keep you in prison. You have your lawyer arguing on your part trying to get you to come out. And you got the 3 judges, and you need to get at least 2 of them on your side. And I can remember my lawyers began to argue my points. And I can remember one judge started to agree and came over. And as she began to present the facts and argue, then the second judge came over. And when I looked, as she continued, the third judge came over and was agreeing. And I've never seen anything like this. As she continued to argue. The prosecutor, whose responsibility, whose one job to do that day is to keep you in prison, the prosecutor came over and was agreeing. And so the whole court had agreed that, okay, listen, I should not have been there. That I should be set free. And I walk out of prison that day a free man. Nothing short, but the grace, it has to be God. It was only God. But we got to be careful about the decisions that we make. Not everyone turns out to be as fortunate as I was. Because I had elevated to be one of the leaders in the gang. But there were persons that I leave in prison, their very first offense, and they never came out. First offense they ever made. 20, 30, 40 years. Some persons are fortunate, but not everyone is. God is a God of a second chance. But believe me, you got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. You got to make the decisions. Your friend ain't going to be there with you. When I went before the judge to face those charges, I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of followers. None of them was there. They may have been on the outside of the court. But I had to face the music for myself. And every single one of you got to face the music of life for yourself. You got to do that. As a society, like I said, people tend to make things that are not good, tend to make them to be good. Some of the older people in here can attest to this. Growing up, when a woman would have a child without being married, that was like a shame. That was a disgrace. In fact, in some cases, the parents would try to send her away, send her off to the island, send her to somewhere else where nobody knew her. But today that is changing. In fact, it was so serious, they even had a song here in the Bahamas. I don't know if some of y'all may know it, y'all may be too young to know the song that says, if you're old enough to do this to me, daughter, old enough to marry she, my son, don't try to run, because I ain't gonna mess with this shotgun. Y'all may not remember that.
Yeah, no, that's all.
To say it again, my son, don't try to run, because I ain't gonna mess with this shotgun. That's the daddy saying to the young man who get his daughter pregnant. You get her pregnant, you gotta go marry her. Young ladies, believe me. When we look at the prisons, the majority of the persons in the prisons came from single parent homes. They came from a home, in most cases, of a single mother. That is not the way that God designed it. He didn't ordain it that way. It takes two to make it. A woman can't have a child by herself, and a man can. In fact, that's what I guess God knows what He's doing when He let the woman be the one to bear the children, because we can't take no pain. As tough as you may be, as tough as we may seem, oh, when pain comes, you all know we saw. Live with the pain that us we get when toothache, listen. I mean, you wouldn't think that's your daddy. You wouldn't think that's a man. But God knows what He was doing. My wife cannot raise my son by herself because she wouldn't know exactly what to do. I can't raise my daughter by herself because I don't really know. But it takes the two of us to raise those children up. I mean, the woman do the most of the stuff anyhow. I mean, I'm just being real. When you look at even men, like I say, young ladies, don't be nobody baby mother. Don't do it. Do not be anyone's baby mother. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. Don't do it. See, because it puts you and your child at a disadvantage. If that's how God ordained it, He know why He do it like that. Young men, don't be nobody's baby daddy. This is real. You hear this from man, don't be nobody's baby daddy.